That is an interesting thing that Skylar brought. Like, I didn't even think about it that way. Was like one day I was talking to him and I was like asking him like, oh, like what do you like? I'm having this problem. Like I can't figure it out. And then he's like, just went to ChatGPT, like asked it how to fix the problem, and it was like a technical issue. And I was like, why have I never thought to just ask it how to like? Why am I still Googling this stuff and not just
Right.
asking ChatGPT how to fix these problems?
Welcome to Process Makes Purpose, the podcast that explores innovative branding, digital marketing, and entrepreneurship. Our goal is to help you unlock your brand's full potential in today's digital landscape. Tune in to gain actionable knowledge and proven tactics to elevate your business.
More rolling with it, but
I like
yeah,
it. We're broadening it. We're broadening our horizons here, looping in sky.
yep. We're bringing in Skylar. We're bringing in the big guns today.
Big guns.
Yep. So so we're starting another podcast episode here of Process Makes Purpose, where we're planning to dive into AI. So if you're new here, we talk a lot about branding, digital marketing, entrepreneurship, and different things in the market that are going on that influence all those different spheres. And one that's kind of controversial right now is AI. And I also just want to take a moment to introduce Skylar here. He is one of our fantastic team members here. He's getting into more of a project management role with us, which we've been loving to see him take that on. And he's a lot of the creative that you see out there from Mosaic, he's touched in some way, shape, or form. And so even this podcast, the podcast you're watching now, brought to you by Skylar. So I just want to introduce him there. Love having him on the team. He just love working with him. Worked with him for a long time now. But I think this is a good topic. It's something that, in some ways is a buzzword. I say controversial intentionally because there's some people that we've talked to that want absolutely nothing to do with AI, and I think that's the wrong approach, but I also think the other incorrect approach is going way too hard into AI. So I think there's a happy medium that you can arrive to that is actually impactful for you and your business. And I just want to talk about some of what that looks like for businesses today and how you can benefit from it, but how you also probably shouldn't fully rely on it. Because just transparently, today I tried to get an idea from ChatGPT on just a random subject, and it was down. So like it can go down, and then what do you do if you're fully reliant on it? So
Oh, it was
um,
down.
yeah, give me a 404, which I haven't gotten in a while. When it first launched, it was going down like every other day, and it's been pretty stable for a couple months now. But yeah, today was the first time I got a 404 in quite a while. So
Wow.
Mm.
I've never seen that.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's a reality of it, right? So that's something that I think is you have to consider that, right? If you're going to be because I think what you're seeing now is there's some people that are going so hard into it, they're reducing their labor and saying we're going to just replace people with AI. But what happens when these servers go down every once in a while? Like if it was down for half a day, what does that do at a larger scale business, right? Like
Hmm.
now what do? You took out
Yeah.
all the people that could be helping you. Now you don't have any help. So that's one of the downsides, which I don't want to go too much on the downsides to start here, but I do think there are some positives, right? Like for me, ideation, that's one thing that I think AI has been really helpful for me for like brainstorming, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
definitely.
sure.
Absolutely.
Brainstorming, researching, yeah, just like the first draft, really, honestly. First draft of anything is
Yeah.
what I use it for, mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like idea fatigue, right? Like that's something that like if you're just sitting there and you're just like especially with content creation, which is something that I think it's the biggest thing that can help businesses for it, like it's a minimal level is like just coming up with ideas for content. The amount of times like prior to AI and stuff that we would sit down and be like, how do we say the same thing again for the 6 month in a row? Like coming up with different angles to bring up that stuff is it's pretty taxing to come up with new ideas and new angles all the time. So you can kind of just be like, give me 20 ideas, and if 15 of them don't work, it's okay. You still got five to work from there, which were five more than you had before you just asked it, and it took it 10 seconds to figure that out for you. But
Hmm.
that's one thing that I really like it for personally.
Yeah, it's definitely been nice for the automation. I would say I would say one of the first times I saw the actual like power of it was putting together my timesheets. I know like we've all talked about this obviously
Hmm.
not on the pod, but
Yeah, yeah.
like feeding it like typed out logic like through words and then seeing it put together a code for you that can like make your life easier. Like those scripts that I've created have helped me so much. Like so much, and it's not necessarily related to, like prep work for like my actual work or anything like that necessarily. But man, it's just like it's insane sometimes seeing those capabilities and how it puts two and two together.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think the ability that I use it as well as for invoicing. So there was a situation where like I was manually going in and trying to balance invoices from contractors with a P&L sheet, and like I was manually going in and doing that, and I was like, wait, can I just like make it output a table that I can copy and paste? And then it took something that would be a full day of work almost of just trying to track down all this and where does this go and who is this for, and it would just kind of spit it out in the perfect format. I could just paste it right in, and then we were good to go. And that took a full day project down to I don't know, maybe an hour, maybe 45 minutes. So stuff like that. It's I think the word that I use when I think about AI a lot is force multiplier, right? It's not a force
Yeah,
replacer. It doesn't replace people, but it multiplies their abilities on the team. It kind of gives them personal assistance to help them do their job.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like an EA, but
Yeah.
and you can train it however you need it to be. Yeah, I don't think I go in a workday without opening up ChatGPT or Perplexity.
Yeah,
Like
same.
it's just part of the day. I don't
What do
know.
you use Perplexity for?
Perplexity is more like research based, so yeah, it's
Gotcha.
more like, and they have really good. It organizes all the sources really well. Gets you like nice, concise data. ChatGPT feels more of like a like you said, an ideation tool. The first draft, content, support type
Hmm.
activities. But I've even used it for things like stuff I would have issues with in my past life with like with my other business and with Next Phase we're looking at small business financials all the time, and oftentimes we get them in not great formats, right? Like a PDF document or like a scanned PDF document, a
Right.
scanned
Yeah.
print, and you're like, okay, well, I guess now I'm either going to sit here with one screen up, it up on one screen, and then have a spreadsheet on the other and just type away, or I upload the file to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you turn this into an Excel document for me?
Yeah.
And it's not perfect, but gosh, it's pretty gosh darn close. And
Yeah.
that is like so like yeah, like in my past life, you would give that to a subordinate and say, "Hey, do plug numbers," but you don't need to do that, right? Like
Right.
it
Yeah, it's
removes
really
that
interesting.
need, and so I think yeah, when it amplifies your ability to get work done faster and just more efficiently because it makes things like that super fast. So
Yeah, I think especially in your case, as somebody that has a bunch of plates you're spinning with different businesses, being able to take some of the load off of those type of small tasks that you would rather not have to spend your time and energy on.
oh
Like
man,
heck yeah, all day. Turn that dial up as much as you can.
for sure,
That's how I see it too.
Yeah,
for
D.
sure.
So what was the name of that one again? That model?
The
Perplexity?
perplexity.
Yeah, so how does that deliver to you? Like, how does it
Uh,
deliver outputs to you?
It's
What's
the
the
exact
focus?
same format, like a chat format, chat box, same exact thing. The interface is like you can't even really differentiate the two.
Hmm.
So it gives you the same, but I think what it's better at, and we can have like some sort of demo, but like it's really particular about its source materials, and I don't know how it scrapes differently or how it pulls information differently than ChatGPT, but I guess it's a little hard to explain. If I could show you
Sure,
what I
yeah.
mean, if I could type a prompt into GPT and then type a prompt into Perplexity, you would be able to tell the difference.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know if people understand totally yet about like how many platforms exist, like of
Oh
like
yeah.
LLMs that have already been created. Like
Hmm.
I can't really say like I use chat or like I was using ChatGPT like on the daily, but man, I was using some form of AI in some way,
Mm,
shape, or form through like totally for many different platforms throughout like so much of the creative work I've already done. Like, and just seeing the differences between the two has been really fascinating to me. Just thinking about like probably what they feed that LLM to like get it to that direction, and it makes me curious about like which way they're going to change even more, you know?
oh, interesting.
Yeah, because I've used Adobe's for, replacing faces and whatnot and struggles quite a bit. And then I've used the audio one, which is so fascinating, so kind of freaky in a way where you can clone people's voices and everything. And then ChatGPT has been like a lot of like ideation and it's mainly text based and everything. So just
Hmm.
interesting to see how
Yeah.
it's all kind of like people are creating like a foothold for themselves and like finding a niche even within the LLM structure, I think is really interesting. But
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the voice thing is really interesting because that's not like I don't know. Would you consider that force multiplier, or you consider that like just magic?
it's a good
Yeah.
question.
What like
I
what
would
even
say
is
yeah.
that?
Uh,
Yes.
it's a little bit of both. I mean, in my use case, I mean, I consider it a force multiplier because, like, like in creating these podcasts for a lot of people, it's been a little challenging trying to get them in like the flow of like being on camera and like being themselves on camera. That's just like a
Hmm.
naturally challenging thing to do yourself, and then to try and bring someone into that and like train them and like hold their hand through that's really tough. So when they're doing like their reads for like intros and stuff, sometimes it's really helpful. Like if there's just like one little section that's out, I just feed it the script back and then I, write what I needed to do. I mean, like, like I would probably go through like 20 takes or something like that of the same sentence over and over, but it does help. Like there's some times where, I mean, hopefully viewers won't notice it, but there's sometimes where it's like slid in there where
Mm,
I've like used the voice and replaced the section just to keep the flow. So,
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
and,
don't know.
and and just to mention like who that benefits, right? Like in those applications, we don't have to, Skylar's usage of the audio voice AI tools that we've used saves our clients time from having to go back in, re-record something, and get it perfectly. Instead, we can say, okay, like if you're comfortable with us using the software, we can manipulate it such that you don't have to touch anything anymore. We got it.
Right.
Right.
Um, so yeah, really, really powerful, powerful stuff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, thank you for clarifying. It's always done with permission. It's
Yeah,
always done with permission, of
has to
course.
be.
Yeah. Um, but yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like on that the thing that we used it as well for that was interesting, not just the trailers, but there was an opportunity where somebody had a really long podcast and we ended up splitting it into a part one and part two. And instead of being like, hey, can you jump on and record these two sentences of like we'll pick up this conversation in the next episode, and then in the next one having welcome back to such and such, we're picking up our conversation. Like instead of having them say all that into a script, we just typed it out with their voice, and then it read it in the beginning and end, and didn't have to disturb their time at all. Didn't have to go through planning and scheduling of like, hey, when can you get on, and delay getting the podcast out. So just like another point of like where that can be really useful. But I would say too, like to bring that into the content side. So that's from the creative piece, but from a business owner's perspective, somewhere else that I see like a really good application is to get more consistent with content. So I think one of the biggest things, and again, like I've sat in the seat of having to say like, how do we say the same thing again this month, but say it different so people pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's the struggle of doing marketing from a business perspective that I think ChatGPT and other LLMs like Skylar has brought up. There's plenty of them out there, but I think one of the things that they can help with is being more consistent with doing that. Because that's the thing you'll oftentimes see if you look into a lot of businesses. They'll have a week or two of being great on getting their posts out, and then they drop off for 2 months, and they're like, oh yeah, we got to do that, and then they do it for a week or two, and they drop off. So I think the that brain fatigue of like having to think through how to do that every month, like that's where ChatGPT as a small business owner can be really helpful. But I say that with a caveat because
Mm-hmm.
if you use it and rely on it too much without knowing how to use it, you'll just sound like everybody else. And when you post stuff that sounds like everybody else, people will ignore it because there's nothing unique about it. There's nothing about it that's going to grab their attention, right? So you're kind of training people to ignore your stuff. So
Mm.
you can sometimes do harm if you end up using it too much and relying on it too much. So if you view it as a force multiplier rather than the solution to problems as a whole, that's probably the better way to look at it, where it gets you maybe to the red zone, right? You're in the red zone, you're ready to do the throw the touchdown, but you have to throw the touchdown. Like, it's not throwing a touchdown for you. It'll get you to the red zone, it'll get you almost there, but I've found in almost every case it still takes a human touch, other than very algorithmic 1+1=2 situations. Anything creative whatsoever definitely needs a human touch. Otherwise, you do end up sounding like AI.
Oh, dude, you're right on the money with that. I mean, in all of the things that I've done, it has never gotten me to 100%. Like, if I get it to read that same script, it will not sound human by the end. I've never gotten AI to do 100% of a task for me yet. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well. Like, yeah, I mean, it helps. It just helps like a lot, and gets you a long way down the field. But man, it really struggles in that last like 10%, quite a bit,
Mhm.
quite a bit from my experience. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
if you're doing anything, I've found even with numbers or with facts, it's actually a good practice to ask it to check its work. Because you'd be surprised how often it's like, oh, you're right, I did miss that. And then, like, even with my example of the invoicing, like, I would just tell it to make sure that the numbers match what the inputs were. And then oftentimes there would be one number that was like slightly off, and then I would check its work after it checked its work and be like, okay, now we're good to go. But I
Hmm.
would never take anything from it and just copy paste and say that's good to go. Even the data stuff, it can sometimes mess up on. Don't know what that is, and I'm sure that will actually be worked out within the next few months, and what we're talking about now will be obsolete with that. But at least from a creative standpoint, I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
mm-hmm.
Sky,
Yeah,
you've done that before too, right? But more personal related stuff. Like it'll tell you things that seem a little bit like, I don't know,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
a little censored, and then you ask it, you poke it back, and then it says, "Oh yeah, you got me."
You can tell when like it doesn't want to go, or like it has like some kind of bias to a degree. Like, you can definitely tell
Mhm.
that. I think it's just a matter of like whether you're looking out for it or not. But that is definitely like more of a practical thing, I would say, more of like a life thing.
Right, right, right.
I haven't seen that like come up with like work related things, like where
Hmm.
well, sometimes it does try to fill in the blanks. There's still that like phantom element that I'm seeing like quite a bit. Like, even just today, like I had a problem with Adobe and resyncing and everything, and I asked it for help. I explained the problem and all that stuff, and then it just gave me a phantom answer. Like, I know that what it told me to do is not going to work, and I know that that's not the way to do it on the Adobe website. Like, those things still come up. Um, so the phantom part, and then the bias part, I've noticed a little bit. But you can still get it. You can still get it back, like back on track, which is interesting
That's
too.
that's a wild aspect to it, I think. The fact that
Yeah,
you
it
can
is.
challenge it.
Yeah, you can. Definitely can. And then it'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Like, I guess I got some facts wrong or something like." then
It's
then you're like,
crazy.
"Oh, I guess you did."
Well, I think
But
I think that ties back to, and probably what I would summarize the reason why it's not as good with creative prompts in general also ties to that. And I think the problem is discernment, right? So
Mm.
yeah.
they're I think the reason that they're called LLMs, which is a language model, is that it's more so the algorithm is geared towards how to create language rather than how to create correct statements, which, there's probably going to
Yeah.
be an AI expert in the comment that's like, that's actually not correct. But my hypothesis would be like, that's probably why there's sometimes those discrepancies of like, why is this just not correct out the box? Like what you were saying, where you asked it for advice on something and it just gave you advice, and you're like, this is not actually true. Like, it's just a false statement because it's not how you would go about doing it in the program. I think it might just be And again, this is my guess, is it might just be that it's programming what it thinks is a correct response based off of language and not off of factual statements, which would be more of a discerning model than a language model, which
Mm.
I'm sure that will be in future updates. And these type of conversations, the ironic thing is, like, you could probably do one of these every month and it will change as to what the truth of the market is right now, because what it
Yeah.
was even 2 months ago is completely different than what it is now.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
definitely. Definitely. I mean, even going to what you said too, Kyle, like that, I think that's the reason why your argument is very much like similar to mine in the sense that I don't think it's a total replacer yet. I think it's a replacer of certain responsibilities, but because of that fact, because it doesn't have a discernment like output, that's
Mhm.
that's missing the gap between like the human element. So even looking at it from like what I've used it for help with copywriting, if I've used it for help with design or web or whatever that would be, especially for design, that's something so human focused and it has to be human from like conception to reception. I think that'd be the word for it. Like that's a whole human process. Design is all about a human communication structure. So
Hmm.
I don't know. I think that's ultimately why, like, I still argue it's a force multiplier, and I don't think it's quite a replacer. I mean, at least from what we see right now at the time of this episode. But yeah.
Yeah, I think what's going to end up happening is that those people that view it as a replacer and run, especially like from a marketing perspective for businesses, like those people that are running it as a replacer rather than a force multiplier and not really touching what's being output, there's going to be, with the reduced barrier to entry to creating content, there will be inevitably more content. But it doesn't, just because there's more doesn't mean it's going to be more good content, right? Because they're
Mm.
probably just
Right.
going to feed it prompts which are very nuanced, and you're going to get the same answer as anybody else. So if you're a lawyer and you're just like, hey, I want to make content about car accidents, and then it's going to give you stuff about it, and then, but if you're not going to give it very specific prompts, if you're not going to give it the audience that you're trying to speak to, if you're not very diligent in how you're managing those, you're just going to sound like everybody else. And so I think there's going to be a lot of content here in the next 6 to 9 months that just starts to hit feeds, and people are going to start to get tired of seeing it. And like,
Mm.
the other thing too is, like, I would caution people as well, is there's going to be video content now that AI can do video and photos. So it could just do photos before, and then the videos, you're like, it was laughable. You're like, yeah, this is AI. But
Yeah.
now it's starting to get to the point where it's a little freaky. Like, it's really good at video now, and it's getting better. And I think there's going to be, again, that's going to be another thing that floods the market, right? Because video is the highest performing content. So why wouldn't you just increase your likelihood of getting impressions and engagement by making AI videos? But again, if you're not steering it well, it's just going to be poor content that doesn't land with your audience, that doesn't have good value to it, and your content's going to tank. But then there's going to be a lot of people doing that, and there's going to be a lot of people that are the people who are going to stand out are those that take that stuff as a baseline foundation and then build upon it, rather than take that as the finished product.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's interesting because it's the algorithms in a lot of these social media platforms don't care necessarily about quality of content, it seems. They just care about what checks the box within the algorithm, right?
Mhm.
So as more stuff floods, doesn't that, and we have more faceless, influencers flood the market, doesn't that quality just goes out the window, no?
Yeah. Yeah. I also think it's probably worth talking about like how you'll notice that, especially
Mm.
from like a marketing perspective. Because when you engage with it a lot, I mean, opening up this question to both of you, like, can both of you tell when something is written by AI for the most part at this point?
I
I
mean,
I can.
you can tell when people, I mean, because we've used, like, I personally have used ChatGPT enough to know that when somebody uses it, even like, because people don't even, in my experience with it, people don't even disguise it. Like, even when you copy paste and they have like the bold headers and then
Yeah, it's
the,
true.
the chunks, like it's
Right.
people will just copy paste. And so yeah, when it comes to stuff like that, it's like, okay, you did
Yeah.
not write this.
Right. Yeah.
But even in LinkedIn, I don't think it's that much different. Yeah, because you just know you just you say to yourself, "Oh, I know that person personally. They do not speak like that. There's no way that they would ever speak like that. Somebody's managing that account and they're using ChatGPT."
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can tell. Kyle, I'm sure you probably see the formulaic output of it.
Yeah.
There's a rhythm to it.
Yep.
There's like a
For
whole
sure.
rhythm in grammar, there's a whole rhythm in structure, there's a whole rhythm in like how it words the conclusion. Like I feel like it is like you can tell, and I feel like the reason why you can tell is partially because you know that that's not connecting with you in that moment. And it feels very wishy-washy.
Right.
Which, for us being very human-centered and very much like attached to, you know, I wouldn't say necessarily the old way of doing things, but a very personable brand and a very
Hmm.
personable like
Yeah.
working environment. Like for us, it's tricky, yeah, we just have a very different way of how we'd like to structure that and be more intentional with how we want to word, our copywriting for our clients and for their audiences. And if we just used AI, like I feel like we'd be in a kind of a rough spot, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I've found if I want to train a specific AI model for a particular voice, it takes a lot of work. Like
yeah,
it's not just like a quick little like, oh, I'm just gonna train an AI to answer emails for me. It's like I'm inputting my previous emails in to get it to train on my voice and like how I say things, how I operate, and then from there I use that as a baseline. But then from there it's a lot of tweaking of like I would never say it like that. Like don't ever say this.
Okay.
Don't ever say in today's evolving technological landscape. Like nobody says that. Like why are we posting stuff like this? You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So if you read your content and it feels like that, stop making that content.
yeah. But I think it's so important for people to know when because things are not stopped getting more digital, and the digital like footprint for a business and a brand is so much more important, and it just keeps getting more important. Like that's not going away.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
so like I think like throwing that out there for people who are seeing the opening of like the force multiplier, where it's like, man, I could start a brand like all on my own, or like, I can really like maybe execute on some of the ideas that I had. Or maybe make the creative like uh part of like starting a business like a little bit easier. Well,
Hmm.
that's the other part of it that you need to understand as well, is that your output is probably not going to fit. And it is a very cautious, you got to be very cautious about like how you're starting out with that, from my point of
Yeah.
view personally. But
Yeah, I think like your point on like the business piece of it. If you wanted to write a business plan and you don't want to start from a blank page, great way to start. But it's probably giving you objectives and goals that are completely off base. Like if you're like, how much can I expect to make in the first year? And it's like 1.5 million. You're like, unless you're getting
Great.
some
I'm
capital
on
and
my
like
way.
yeah it's like and then it gives you the layout of what you need to do, and either the layout of what you need to do from like if you have experience in that realm at all, you'd be like, yeah, no, that's not even a feasible thing for me to do, or it's like there's no way the outcome of that effort is that amount of money. So it's like it's a good place to start as a foundation of like, oh, maybe I should be thinking about income revenue streams and ways to diversify like if you're going to be thinking through that stuff, like it's a good way to give you a framework. But I wouldn't be like, this is my business plan, because
yeah, right.
what it spits out is typically not a very good business plan. It's a good framework, but not a good accurate representation as to what you'll get out of that. But I do think one thing like podcasts in my mind is going to be another way that people are differentiated with this new rise of AI video. Like this stuff right here where we're talking right now, and you can see our faces, you can see us talking. One thing that Skylar brought up that a lot of people may not know about was faceless influencers. It was either Skylar or D. I can't remember which one of you guys said
Hmm.
it, but the faceless influencer thing, there's going to be more videos, and you'll start to notice now that I say it, is there's essentially just text that is written on the screen with a voiceover, and then video of things that are popping up that are oftentimes related, but actually sometimes if you watch it, you're like, that has nothing to do with what they're talking about
Yeah,
at all. If you think about
That's
it,
so true. That's
yeah,
so true.
but like a lot of times it is related, but like sometimes it's like adjacent and you're like, that's not what they're talking about, but it's on the screen, we'll roll with it. But you'll notice more of that stuff is popping up. And I think what's going to happen again is there's going to be a flood of that because it's easier and easier to do. Like there's applications like CapCut where you can just tell it like, I want to make a video post about kittens today, and it'll just give you a full script. It'll pull photos and videos of kittens. It'll put a voiceover behind it, and then you just hit export and upload. And there's going to be a lot of people doing that. And I think the way to stand out within that type of market is to not look like that, right? So one of the ways I would encourage people to do is like these type of things, whether it's a podcast, whether it's, filming yourself, talking about things like that will help you stand out as it continues to go more faceless and more generic, go more personalized would be my encouragement to all businesses or people that just want influence within whatever space they're in.
Hmm. Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing because the algorithm kind of supports it, and the content isn't necessarily bad sometimes either. Like you'll see, like I've seen videos like that on Instagram and things, and you watch it and you're like, oh, well, that was actually kind of compelling. Like it's not
Hmm.
horrible,
Yeah.
but I think, but it, and so it might have good engagement, right? Like people might be reacting to it and liking it, commenting, sharing, whatever. Um, but I think the interesting thing to point out is that, how does that, if at all, translate to revenue in your business?
Right.
And I
Right.
think that may be part of the disconnect in the future with with the flooding, flooding the market with these AI faceless creators, or even people
Yeah,
that have faces that are just creating content that doesn't have anything personalized. It performs, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm not really sure how things like Reels are like monetized necessarily. Um, I'm pretty sure TikTok had its own type of monetization. But on YouTube, those people, that is their business. It
Mm,
is
right,
Hmm.
is like just cranking out content because they're going off the ad revenue. And
right,
like the clicks and all that stuff, like the
Hmm.
CPM metrics and all that.
right.
But for businesses that do want to stand out, like in that environment, that is not, I don't think that that's the play. It
Hmm.
could be in some circumstances, but it has to be a very, very specific thing. But I don't know. I'm just happy that we're kind of like off the need for virality in a sense. But yeah, I also, in one sense, Kyle, with that like flood of content that's coming through the door, that might be like a little bit more low effort, or it might just not be as nice like coming out the door. I
Hmm.
do think in one sense that there's a positive and a negative in that, where there's a negative where people are going to be drawn to it, and there's a negative sense and people are going to want that. But there's a positive sense is that when you do something that is a little bit better, like you have a little bit better execution in what you actually produce, it stands out so much more.
Yeah.
Um, so, that's one part of it where I do see a big positive in that sense of it. Um,
Yeah, I think personality driven, so things like this, but then also effort will be rewarded in content more so. And the thing is, I say that with kind of an asterisk though, because effort and personality are only a piece of it, because value of what is inside your content is ultimately the highest thing that's going to drive engagement and impressions. So like there's plenty of people, and I'm sure you've seen videos like this that are on what looks like a 2008 Motorola Razor that they film on, but are just going bonkers on the internet. You know what
oh
I mean?
yeah,
Like people are like
yeah,
sharing them, commenting, liking like crazy because like it's just the value of the content is great, but like maybe that value of that video isn't what you're looking for as a business, right? Like you that's more so maybe an entertainment side, and there's really you don't get an emotional connection to the author of the video necessarily, but there's something to be learned in that, right? Success leaves clues. So I would look at that and say it's not necessarily always about the quality of your video, or what if it's personality driven, but like what is in the video, right? Like as the end consumer, like they want value in some sort of way, and we could probably do a whole podcast or yeah, a whole podcast episode about like what is valuable within content. So that I have some thoughts on that, but we don't have to get in that. We're talking about AI today.
Mm,
Um, but I think like there's if you get all of these different pieces right, though, I think like you're just set up to win in the next, again, 6 to 9 months. And it's hard to project outside of that because AI a year ago and 2 years ago is a completely different thing than it is today. I think there's, and Skylar, I'm curious if you can like even stitch this in, but I've seen videos of like the Will Smith eating spaghetti video that like first circulated
Yeah.
with AI back in the day and how awful it was versus like what it does now. And
Yeah.
like somebody did a side by side of like the same prompt putting like Will Smith eating spaghetti, and the first one like a year and a half ago was just awful, hilarious, but awful. And the one
Yeah.
that's more recent actually looks like Will Smith eating spaghetti. So,
Yeah. That's very
so
true. It changed very quickly.
yeah,
It changed
yeah.
very
So,
quickly.
I mean, for me, like if I'm like as you know, we run this business. It's a thing of we want to keep a pulse on it to see where it's moving, right? Because there are pieces of our workflows that we could use our time spend on other things that actually move the needle more.
Mm-hmm.
Like the cases that we brought up of, whether it be data entry or ideation of things that, aren't, again, moving the needle as much. And then you can devote your time to the things that are actually going to help your business grow. So as it continues to develop, that's something that I think, at least from where I sit, like I want to keep the pulse on that. I don't want to bury my head in the sand and wish that AI wasn't around, because I think that's a problem that if you wish that, like there's ethical things you can get into about AI, and you can talk about like what the downsides of it are and like what some of the downstream effects can be. But the reality is like the genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back
Right.
in.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so like how are you going to utilize it in the capacity that is ethical? So that's where I say like force multiplier, not force replacer,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a more ethical way of looking at it. I don't want to take people off my team and be like, you guys are all getting replaced by AI, because
Yeah.
ethically I have concerns about that. But then also like for our clients, that's not a good outcome for them either. And again, you're not protecting yourself against potential downsides of if AI crashes or servers go down for a week or a day or whatever. That like there's things on the other side of that coin that people aren't considering when they make decisions like that, in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sky and I have talked about this offline, but I also like when you talk about avoiding it or putting your head in the sand, I just don't like it. Just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, because I kind of think about AI and where it's heading and how it's developed and the speed at which it's developing is something comparable to the internet when it first came out.
Yeah.
And you didn't. I mean, I'm sure people buried their head in the sands then, but like, what did that get you? You just you wound up losing later down the road, right? Like, you needed to adopt the utilization of the internet and what it brought and the other tools that it brought you in order to have success in the new economy. And
Right.
I think AI is just the next iteration of that. And so I think it's important, um, at least to understand, and understand how it may benefit you in your business or even your day to day, because it ultimately will affect our economy and how business gets done. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree, D. And I don't know. I guess like my take, I know all the fear. There's a lot of fear about AI these days. I don't know. I just see it. It's just going to change what your job looks like a little bit.
right.
It's not necessarily going to change your job. Like you still need a human at the end. Like you 100% still need a person to approve the like the message or to like approve the fact that it is going to reach human beings.
Hmm.
And like with if you look back at like, Blockbuster or those things, like just relying on, the customer base you have, even though there's a better option that's right there, is definitely a mistake. Like it's
Right.
still definitely a mistake when something is changing the environment and changing the industry. Like, yeah, like what Kyle said and what you said, you do have to understand at least what it is and at least what it's doing, its failures and limitations, what it does well. And then also learn, like, don't be so protective over what you're doing. Think about how you can, invite it in even just a little bit, and that might just change your job dynamic at the end of the
Hmm.
day. It might not replace you entirely as a human being, because I just don't think it can yet. At least for
Yeah.
creative
I think
endeavors.
it's there's new different opportunities in the market now because of it, right? It's I think with any market disrupting technology, you can go all the way back. I think the first best example of it is the printing press. Like that was like the first thing that changed history in so many ways where like if you were a scribe in that day, probably a good idea to start learning how to operate a printing press rather
Right.
than continuing to be a scribe, right? Like
Yeah.
Right.
like look at the automotive industry. Like probably a good idea to learn how to fix axles on cars over axles on wagons. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be new opportunity that comes with it as culture changes to adopt these new technologies and like you can go down the line of all the different ones that have popped up through time where there was always almost every single time too there was pushback or people that were naysayers that were like that's a trend not going to catch on like who cares like that's for the rich people that was another thing but then like as with capitalism it ends up working its way back down right like the Model T may not have necessarily been every person's car, but at some point the car became something that everybody could hopefully attain in their lifetime, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
became a very quick reality as more people got into the game. Same thing with AI. Like I think if you're just saying like this will never apply to anything in my job, like I would try and find some things that it might be able to help you with. Like it might be the small things that you're not expecting. Like if you have to sit down, even party planning, like if you're party planning for your job, that can probably help you with that. Like the small things like that, like you would be surprised. But then there's also like the downside too, and again, there could be the downstream effect that we're not anticipating, which is people not being able to critically think as much because they rely on some sort of system to do that. But I think there's always been that threat with technology, right? Like, so people said that with Google, like people won't think for themselves because like they're just going to Google everything. And it's like, they should use encyclopedias instead of Google. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you can make that argument again for every technology. But I do think there's an element of like, I think if you just kind of hold it, if you treat it as what it is and not what you wish it would be or what it could be for your life, I think that's the best way to approach it. Where it's like this isn't the end all be all, and it's probably not going to be for a while still. But there's probably applications you could use it for, in my mind at least. But I don't think there's any job out there that couldn't utilize it, even as like a 5% piece of their job at this point.
I
Definitely.
agree. I
I definitely
completely
agree
agree.
with that.
We even use it in our personal lives. I mean, it
Yeah,
replaces Google at this point for me.
Same.
yeah. That is an interesting thing that Skylar brought. Like, I didn't even think about it that way. Was like one day I was talking to him and I was like asking him like, "Oh, like what do you like? I'm having this problem. Like I can't figure it out." And then he's like, just went to ChatGPT, like asked it how to fix the problem, and it was like a technical issue. And I was like, "Why have I never thought to just ask it how to like? Why am I still Googling this stuff and not just
Right.
asking ChatGPT how to fix these problems?"
Yeah, you
I,
can't
I think
argue.
Skylar, didn't you like have it give you some guidance on changing the oil in your car for the first time or something like that? Like you found some things that weren't totally right, but like again, my mind would have been like Google, YouTube. You're like ChatGPT. Like my mind wouldn't have even gone there. But like such an interesting thing, like it can help you with even stuff like that. Like that's not something I think a lot of people think of it for.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely did help me with that. The thing was that like I just use it to set the beginning, you know? Like I use it
Hmm.
the same way we use it professionally. Like I don't
Right.
use it as the end all be all. I use it as the beginning. And the reason why I like it and the reason why I like using it like this is because Google will try to guess what you want and will rate those certain search results like according to like what it thinks you want. When you are interacting with ChatGPT and you're asking it a question, it gives you almost like all the different various ways you could have been thinking about this as well.
Mm.
So it gives you different paths. I think Google tries to like figure out which path you're on. ChatGPT gives you a bunch of different paths that you can
Mm,
kind of take, you know?
Yeah,
that's
Like
that's
true.
great. That's a great way to say it.
I gave it the make and model of my car. I asked what I needed to do and it gave me like you need to buy this thing and get this thing and then do it this way and like all that stuff. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to watch a YouTube video. And I went on the YouTube video at the end, but it also provided the YouTube video. I think it gave
Mm.
me like two or three options. And I clicked
Hmm.
through those and figured out which one was the closest and then found a good one and then
Yeah.
just did it myself. But, um, but yeah, it's not the end all be all for like literally anything that I do, which is,
Right.
I just keep noticing that as I'm interacting with it, and that's where I'm like, I'm not as scared of it, I think, in the future. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So far. I don't know how it could change. I mean, that's the thing with emerging technology is you have no idea how it can change on the back end and how that
Hmm.
might like totally fundamentally change how it actually works. But as of now, I just I think that we're all kind of like using it to its limitations, honestly. Like as we're
Yeah.
treating it.
I think there's a lot of fear in the unknown, right? So if people haven't interacted with it, I could see it being a more scary concept when you hear about all these things it can do and like what it says and like they watch the videos of them having the new voice models where you can talk to it and it sounds really human and even laughs and like giggles and you're like kind of creepy. But then like the more you work with it, the more you can kind of understand how it's doing that and like how it knows where to bring that stuff. Again, it's just formulaic. That's all it's doing. It's just modeling human behavior off of formulas. And like that's why it sounds human because it's interpreting data from humans. It's like it's not actually human yet.
No, no, yeah.
Yeah.
We're not at the conversation of does AI have rights? We're not quite there
Yeah.
yet.
Right, right.
It's not sentient, but it does kind of mimic it sometimes in ways that I could see if you don't interact with it much would be very creepy.
Mm.
Yeah. You know what else funny with that, Kyle? You see the output. People are reacting to the output. And then when you work with it, you're like, how come that video looks so good? And how come I'm 60 attempts deep and it
Yeah.
still looks like crap? Like,
Right.
it's like, it all works through trial and error. Like,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I bet you that guy spent, like however many hundreds of dollars in like coins or generations or whatever to try and get that one output that finally went viral.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he probably grinded maybe like a few hours trying to get there and writing it in a bunch of different ways and like all that stuff. Like, cause that's what I do when I'm doing it.
Hmm.
Dragging sliders, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
it
I
takes you
just
quite a
think
bit.
like I just think as a business it you're leaving money on the table by not at least seeing how it can be utilized because I
Oh,
think
sure.
especially from an hour spend perspective, even just your own personal time, if you're not going to implement it on your team, like there's things as a business leader in some capacity or manager of people that I promise you will get time back by utilizing it. It's not even like that's the easiest promise I think I could make somebody is you will get time back if you start to utilize it in some capacity. Like I said, even if it's 5% of your time back, that's 5% of your time you can apply to things that are more important. Pouring back into your team, working on systems, whatever that looks like to you. But I think as far as like content within business, I think that's where, as a marketing agency, that's where we can look at it as professionals within that space of saying like there are potential outputs there that you can utilize, but I also caution you against just copying and pasting from AI. But again, the thing that I think it helps the most with is your consistency of posting as a business or as a business leader. Like that's where I think it's the greatest thing that you can just be consistent with your audience and show up week after week or every other day, whatever cadence is that's reasonable for you. But it's a lot more reasonable now that you have help. You're not doing it by yourself anymore. So just think about it like you have an assistant that's giving you a ghostwriting first draft where you just got to dress it up a little bit, make it sound like you, make it sound like your business. That'd be my encouragement, but it still is going to take work. It's not no time spent, like it's not zero time spent, but it is less than you were doing before. But that's why we have our copywriters that help really make our content stand out. In my mind, is and their use of AI is extremely limited, but their capability of making content sound like it's a brand specific voice or an individual specific voice in my mind is unmatched, especially against AI. There's like if you put them side by side, you would not think them even close in the same ballpark. Like our copywriters at this point are so far ahead of that where like I don't have any feeling of like, man, we could just do this with AI. Like when I
Oh
put it
yeah.
next to it, I'm like, it's not even close. It's not even a comparison.
Right. Do you
Mm-mm.
think that's because it's so easily identifiable at this point because people overuse it? So it's not that it's not good. It's just we know. You're
Right.
not fooling anybody.
It's better than nothing in my mind. That's where I'm
Mm,
kind of putting it. It's better than nothing, but it's also far from the best. Like
mm,
it's probably like if I were to give it a grade on a scale, I'd probably give it like a C minus. Uh, that's probably where, and it would be like a, a 72 average across the board every time I would see stuff that comes out of it. But
Mm-hmm.
when I see like what our copywriters turn in, like when it, and how it applies to our clients and how specific and towards the audience and detailed with products and services, like when it gets down to that level, like that's where like I think it really stands out to have a professional writer touching this stuff. Or
Mm-hmm.
like again, if you're a small team, you can't afford resources, like at least having somebody on your team taking the time to not just copy paste it would be my
Mm-hmm.
biggest thing. Like just make it at least go from a C minus to a B minus. Like that would be like if
Yeah.
you can't get it to an A plus, that's okay. Get it to a B minus. So don't do C minus work because you're gonna get ignored on the algorithms.
Yeah, I just think it doesn't connect with people because
Mm-hmm.
it's built by a computer. The output is approved by a computer at the end of the day, or a series of code. It just doesn't. It's not human. It's
Mm-hmm.
just not human, and you don't connect with it in the same way. And I don't think audiences connect with it in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I don't ever feel. I guess when I'm using AI or something like that, like I don't ever feel like I'm interacting with something that has a consciousness, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feels like I'm
Yeah, neither do I.
interacting with like a very, very advanced form of like autocorrect with like a little bit more deductive reasoning involved.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
a
know
good
how
way
it
to put
does
it.
that, but that's how it feels.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. I think that there's just an inherent like magic or something in something that a person produces, and I don't know. You have to, if you're gonna market to a human being, you gotta sound like a human being. Like,
For
you know what
sure.
I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just,
Simple.
yeah,
Yeah. I think for us, while it may be easy to identify it, I think as it continues to gain momentum, it'll be easier for everybody else in the market to identify it too, because it will be like people are good at pattern recognition. So
yeah,
if like not maybe not everybody's the most gifted at it. Like there's some people that are really really good at pattern recognition, but I would say everybody's good at it in that like you can go onto your Instagram, your TikTok, your whatever your short form video content of choice is, because I'm sure everybody has one at this point. Whatever it is, as soon as you sniff an ad, you probably swipe within 2 seconds max. Like you're probably even under a second at this point. You don't even know you do it. So
yeah,
like that's if people are getting that good with ad content, and that's why like advertisers have to take different routes. You have to play that same game with AI content. So like that's going to be the next pattern recognition that people are going to get. That's just like swipe, and so like people like I guess not to go down another rabbit hole, but like to that degree, because people will likely start to identify that and swipe past it, the algorithms won't reward it as much. So there might actually be an argument for the future of not being so infiltrated with it as much as like people continue to not engage with it. So those accounts don't continue to push up. So they
Mm-hmm.
might get initial bumps of, views, and then the algorithm picks up like people don't actually like this stuff. And then it just dives off and you go into like shadow ban jail essentially, where your stuff gets shown to 30 people every time, like that
yeah.
that can happen too. So like I think that's a potential outcome that we didn't explore much, but we'll see. Again, I think tech is going to start to see this trend as well and start to try and figure out ways to either combat it or figure out ways to make sure that the negative effects are minimized, because at the end of the day, all of these social companies want is people on their platforms longer. And if there's a lot of content that is not keeping people on there and making them X off, they're going to find out a way to decrease the amount of that content being shown to people. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a bright spot of it, is like, it's not all doom and gloom. It's not like all the content's going to be bad and you're never going to want to go on your apps again. It's more so like I would be surprised if tech doesn't find ways to identify it quicker and negate the effect of it negatively across their platforms.
Yeah, I agree. And another element that adds to that is that growing sentiment in our culture and like the younger people today of like just being a little bit more anti-tech, or aware of the dangers of just communicating through a screen. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like, I
for
think
sure.
people are becoming sensitive to that. So it's kind of like it could be a twofold part of whatever that movement would be. You could be shadow
Mm-hmm.
banned by
Yeah.
the social media technologies and social media platforms, and then on top of that, people just might not be interested and want
Yeah.
more substance, want more value, want more human interaction.
Yeah, I think
So,
authenticity, like that's again, like that's the big thing at the end of the day. I think is going to be huge. So the more you can look authentic, again, like I don't want to bang on the same drum, but like showing your face, putting yourself out there, being raw and authentic, like not trying to posture as something you're not, like stuff like that is really going to win. As more and more people go to a more poised, faceless, or I would even say just a motionless platform where because like AI does not do emotion. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
that's one thing it
Yep.
doesn't do. So like the more you can be human and find ways to do that creatively, even this is probably a leveled up way of doing it, like through this podcast, but like even just making a story with your phone, pull it out, selfie. You're going to feel weird a couple times doing it, but like just do it and just talk to the camera about something that you're thinking about. And people, I promise, will perform better than your post that AI wrote and told you is going to do well. Like I promise doing that will always outperform the little AI post. So,
Mm.
uh, authenticity, just try, that's not a new thing in content, but it is I think it's just something that's going to be winning, especially as there's less authenticity through AI.
I agree.
Agreed.
100%.
Well, I think that's a good conversation about AI. I think that's we went down some rabbit holes I wasn't expecting. Loved it, but I think we could probably again do this every month and have a different thing to talk about because it's just changing so much and the way we're using it changes so much. But like I said, I think if you're not at least paying attention to it, you're leaving money on the table and also potentially exposing yourself to risk of your competitors taking a look at it and using it. So. I would just say, like, at a minimum, look into it, and I would say also give it a shot because there's a lot of free platforms out there, and you might actually find out it's not so scary after all. So that would be my encouragement to pretty much anybody listening is just give it a shot. But if you want something that sounds a lot better than AI, we know some people that can write some really good content and make some really pretty graphics that really perform well. So I'm just gonna throw that out there because there are some people that know how to do that. They might be sitting on this podcast.
That's so funny.
Shameless
Love it.
plug. It's all right. Hey, I'm proud of our work. It's easy to plug it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I pretty much agreed with you the whole episode because it's like all these challenges with AI. That's what we've been finding through our work.
Thanks for listening to Process Makes Purpose. We hope you gained valuable insights to transform your business journey. Stay tuned for more episodes with actionable strategies and inspiring stories by subscribing to our podcast and connecting with us on LinkedIn. See you next time.